I just got done watching John Wick Chapter 4, and this is a bona fide action masterpiece. You action fanatics, you are not prepared for what Chad Stahelski and Keanu Reeves cooked up for this one. Now, just as a little bit of background context, I absolutely love this entire franchise. John Wick 1 is fantastic. John Wick 2 is probably even better. John Wick Chapter 3 is, again, great. I would go as far as say those are like all 5 out of 5 action films, and John Wick Chapter 4 ups the ante and displays exactly what we want from this franchise and cements the entire John Wick franchise as the greatest action movie franchise of all time. And I say that truly with my entire heart. I understand we have Die Hard. I get it. We got Mission Impossible. I understand we have James Bond and so many more. But this was just the pinnacle of it all. It's a perfect swan song for the character itself as well as this world, but it also leaves enough door open if they do want to continue to explore the world itself. But I truly think when it comes down to everything that's involved with this film, this is how you end a franchise. This is it. I don't need anything else. And I truly do mean that, because John Wick Chapter 4 is about John Wick uncovering a path to defeating the High Table, but before he can earn his freedom, Wick must face off against a new enemy with powerful alliances across the globe and forces that turn old friends into foes. Again, this stars Keanu Reeves, Donnie Yen, Bill Skarsgård, Lawrence Fishburne, Hiroka Sanada, Amir Anderson, Lance Riddick, Rena Swamin, Scott Adkins, Ian McShane, and Clancy Brown, and probably a handful more of people, but those are just some of the names in this. If you got to see my out of the theater reaction yesterday, my mind was blown when I walked out of that movie. I truly am like trying not to cry right now because of how incredible it is. I have like geek tears in my eyes from how much I love this movie. And I was honestly just blown away. Like, my jaw hit the floor so many damn times throughout watching this movie that I'm very excited to see your guys' reactions next week when you guys get to see it. But before we get any further, if you're new here, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, because I do talk movies over here on a daily basis, and we will be doing a John Wick ranking the day of release on March 24th, so do look forward to that. Very excited to provide you guys that movie ranking. Let's make sure to leave your thoughts down below, because that's one of the biggest things about this. I love building a community to talk about movies, and if you love movies, you are certainly in the right place, so make sure to leave your thoughts on the John Wick franchise. But without further ado, let's get into my pros, and flat out, first off, I want to talk about the cast here, because we've known Keanu Reeves is just perfect in this role, and he always embodies John Wick in such a great manner. And you know, it's not one of the strongest acting capabilities, but what you really want to focus on inside this film is the stunts, the choreograph, and specifically with what Keanu Reeves does in this movie. And while his performance as John Wick is probably the strongest in here, specifically certain core scenes that he has throughout the entire film, what I was most impressed with his performance was the physicality. And I know, again, we've seen 3 films already as him within this character, and of course you go throughout his entire career, whether it's Point Break, The Matrix, and even of course Speed. Guy continues to get better with age. I swear Keanu Reeves just ages like fine wine, and that's exactly what he does here. He is killing it in this role, and there are certain scenes in here that he gets to go through, and John Wick just gets to unleash hell. I would go as far to say this has the highest kill count of probably almost any action film I've ever seen. You take the kill count of all 3 John Wick films and combine them together, that is the amount of people that John Wick kills in this one. That's not a spoiler. You get that idea from the trailer. I'm just definitively telling you that, so you can expect that. Of course, with the John Wick world, one of the things that is always so interesting to see is the characters that Wick meets along the way, whether it's old friends, new foes, and in this film, there are quite a few, of course, memorable faces that we get to meet for the very first time, as well as new old friends who decide to come along for the journey. And Donnie Yen, for me, is the big stand of this movie, of course, right up there with Keanu Reeves himself. And Donnie Yen plays a character named Kane, who is this blind, pretty much hitman that's just as good as John Wick. And their past is very interesting, and all I will say is that Lionsgate, if you're watching this, please greenlight a Donnie Yen Kane spinoff. I gotta know everything about this dude's past because he was one of the most fascinating characters, and every single way that Chad used him in this movie was perfection. And a lot has to be given to Donnie Yen specifically for the character that he is portraying. Because the way that he is able to play a visually impaired character is so damn believable. And the way that he moves and flicks around, whether it's with a gun, whether it's with a cane, whether it's with a sword, it does not matter. You consistently are falling in love with this character, and I absolutely ate every single second of it up. One of the things I think we can really much talk about when it comes down to the John Wick films is typically the villains are not always the strongest. They're always fun to watch John Wick go after and get killed. I don't think we've had a strong enough villain since probably John Wick Chapter 2. I think it's easily able to display that Bill Skarsgård plays the best John Wick villain yet. His character Marquise is a very unique French person who every single moment you get with Skarsgård's character is always so fascinating than the last, and you can always see the different themes that they do throughout John Wick, whether it's greed, whether it's personality, whether it's love itself and for this world, and the way that Chad is able to actually visually tell a story at the same time of not having to display it within the words. He shows it. And a lot of Bill Skarsgård's character is shown in production design and cinematography to understand this character to a certain level, and I honestly loved his character as well. Along the lights, Lawrence Fishburne is fantastic as well. It's great to see Ian McShane back. I loved seeing Clancy Brown in this. Scott Adkins as Killa is such a nice addition to the John Wick world. When you meet Killa, it is great. Lance Reddick is always fantastic. Rena Schwama, which I might be mispronouncing that, Rena was phenomenal in this. I wanted more of her in this. Like, she was that damn good, specifically when she shows up for the very first time. Last but not least is Shamir Anderson and Hiroki Sanada, who I'm a fan of course, Sanada itself. But Shamir, this is one of the first few roles that I've ever seen him in, and he was great. I loved his dynamic and the way that he kind of played out inside this world. But Sanada, I mean, he's just a standout always. This movie is a standout when you look at it because I display it and call it a masterpiece of action for one particular reason. It is Chad Stahelski's direction and the way that he's able to take this story at a runtime of specifically 2 hours and 49 minutes, including credits. This is easily the longest John Wick film, and I've gotten to the point where I am very exhausted of long films. Don't get me wrong, it's always great to go and see a long movie because, you know, I want to get as much as I can if I'm loving the film. But when I saw the runtime for this, I was like, that's awesome, that's really long, and I work a day job. Easily, this is the best paced John Wick film. Specifically because there was a point where I went to go check the time, and when I had checked the time, I noticed that there was only 30 minutes left, and I was absolutely baffled by that. I was like, oh my god, that's it? There's only like 30 minutes left? And that's okay to say the least, because it runs at such a tight-knit pace. There's no time for filler. The second this film opens up, it gets you right back into this world of John Wick and gets you right onto the adventure of exactly what John Wick's mission is in for this film. I loved seeing how each act built on the last. And specifically when I look at the last few John Wick films, you know, as much as I love those movies, there are certain points in times and certain story moments where I'm like, well, why did he do that when he could have just done this? And maybe some of the action set pieces get a bit repetitive because John Wick does use a lot of the same moves. Not to say that John Wick didn't learn new moves in here. He does use pretty much the same amount of showcases, but it's the locations, the areas, and the weapons that Chad was able to build into these set designs and this vision that allows Keanu to play around in different environments that, again, not just allows Keanu, but allows our character John Wick to not get repetitive within certain action scenes. And the stunt choreograph, the fight choreograph, everything of that nature was just beautifully handled and perfection top to bottom. I would say from the very first big action set piece, I was sitting there, I was like, this is another great John Wick action set piece. Is it one of the best? No, but it's just getting you in there. It's like the appetizer to it all. Then your giant meal comes about in the middle of the movie and you're watching this. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is all incredible. And the entire time you're watching this movie, no matter what, if it's a slow moment, all the way up, they establish very early on the stakes in this movie. Your heart starts to begin to thump and absolutely start to beat out of your chest, where you are feeling the intensity even in these slower moments. And while these slower moments are building up to those next action set pieces, it's never feeling like filler. It's always feeling important to the story to understand who our characters are, who's involved in this, and what are the stakes for each and every person involved. And like I mentioned, you get that appetizer right at the start, you get dinner right smack dab in the middle, and it's a beefy dinner. You get like this big 30-minute action set piece, and I was just sitting there in awe of it, in love with it, and it just continues and continues. And by the time it had ended, by like literally the last kill in that sequence, I was like, I don't know how you top that. And then I started to click into the back of my head certain moments that were in the trailer that I haven't seen yet, and I'm like, wait, we're about to get more. And the second I realized that, I'm like, when is this next sequence coming? Because we start playing throughout it, and it's a great story. They add more great mythology to the world of the John Wick assassinations, and I loved it, because every little tidbit they added to the mythology and everything like that was just great, and honestly does feel like kind of a fantasy realm of some sorts that I'm just obsessed with. But you get down to the last 45 minutes when they set up something, and you just know you are about to see one of the greatest action set pieces of all time. Set piece to set piece to set piece. John Wick is on a mission, and this mission is going in one full sweep. Whether it starts with some fights on the streets that jumps John Wick into a car, and then you have an amazingly awesome, epic car chase that has it in this giant roundabout with tons of traffic, and I have zero idea how they filmed this without anyone dying in real life. My mind was blown watching this sequence. And it just gets better from there. You get to a one-shot take that I truly, and just as a point of reference, I love one-shot takes. Like, ever since I got into filmmaking and cinematography and, like, just in general, like, action scenes and dramas who use this specific one-shot take, I've always been obsessed with looking up the best and finding the best. This might be one of the best one-shot takes, if not the best one-shot take I've ever seen in a film. Hands down. The way that it pans, my mind is blown. All you gotta know, John Wick with an amazing pistol, John Wick with a fire breath dragon shotgun round gun, and the camera pans into such a unique way that us, as audience members, have to adjust to pretty quickly. But the way that Chad moves it in there, and moves and pans the camera, it felt like I was like watching a video game. But like one of the best video game action set pieces that I've ever gotten to play through. And my heart was pumping so fast. And don't worry, because that's not just it. At the time you get to the last 10 minutes of the film, it ends in a very beautiful Western style swan song that just made me go, by the time the movie ended, that's it. I don't need any more. I hope to God this is it. There's easily, like, don't get me wrong, there are easily areas that they could open up with, whether it's a spin-off or continuing certain things within John Wick's lore or past, whatever you want to say. There is so many different ways that this franchise can continue, and specifically even John Wick's character. But what I will say in the end is, watching this movie, the ending they gave me felt like the perfect swan song to it all. So, John Wick Chapter 4 is a bona fide badass masterpiece. Cementing John Wick as not just one of the greatest action characters of all time, not just cementing that this is one of the greatest action films of all time, but cementing this franchise as the greatest action franchise of all time. Once you think you've seen the cool sequence, it only gets better up until the final 30 minutes, which completely made my jaw hit the floor. Completely outdoes himself again, and I have zero idea how you top anything inside this film if you decide to continue it. I know we're getting that spin-off, The Ballerina. I have no idea what to even think about that, because after seeing this, I don't care to see anything else in this world. It's that freaking good. I will say Donnie Yen was an absolute showstopper in here, and I want a complete spin-off of just his past. I am obsessed with this movie. I absolutely loved it. It is currently my favorite film of 2023. Again, we're only in March, but if you take it for what it is, The Batman was also one of my favorite films of last year. It was my number 2, and it stayed in my top 10 for that entire time, so take that as what you will. John Wick Chapter 4 will absolutely be in my top 10 by the end of this year. I love this movie. I'm obsessed with this movie. This is cinema, and I love movies.
I love movies. Gosh, I love movies. I love watching them, and I love making them.
So with that said, I'm going to give John Wick Chapter 4 an A+. Thank you so much again, guys, for watching this. You guys are really all the best. Make sure to leave your thoughts down below. Look forward to that movie ranking coming soon. And of course, until next time, stay classy.